Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and as you know, we always bring on some top quality guests, and this guest we're having today is no exception. Her name is Karen Kataline, commentator, columnist, talk show radio host. Sis, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, it's good to be with you, and you can call me Karen if you like. That's all right, Corbin.
All right.
Good to talk to you.
And we'll do that. We'll call you Karen. And
even though, they made fun of my name, this is the name my parents gave me, and oh well, I'm going to keep it.
I hear that. And I appreciate that too. So, I know you're busy, and like so many of our guests, you're very productive. So time's important to you. So I just wanted to jump straight into talking a little bit about your background. I'm going to start with your education. I see you have a master's degree from Columbia University. What was that in?
Social work.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't as political then as I am now, but let's just say the school wasn't exactly conservative. That's when Cloward and Piven were there. And pretty as liberal as you can get. I was never a liberal, but I was never quite as politically conservative as I am today, unabashedly so.
Okay. And what moved you to do that? To study social work?
Well, much as you probably are going to mention, the memoir that I wrote in 2012 called Fat Lash, Food Police, and the Fear of Thin was really kind of about my own odyssey with my own dysfunctional family, which most people have today.
Yes.
And I kind of used myself as a guinea pig. I was always very psychologically motivated. I love psychological analysis, and I used that skill in my political op-eds and so forth. Obviously it's just my opinion, but psychology, the short answer is psychology has always been a secondary interest of mine. And I also was a professional actress and singer, and I wanted something more interesting to do to make my living other than waiting tables. So I went to grad school. So I did.
That makes perfect sense. And what was your undergraduate degree in?
Musical theater.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an interesting combination.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I asked that about your, why you went into social work for personal reasons. My daughter she's an undergraduate student, and she wants to be a social worker. And I just said to myself, I said to myself, I didn't say it to her, look, could you find something a little bit more lucrative? Because we have enough broke people in the family. But
you have what in the family?
So we have enough broke people in the family. Can you do something?
Social work in New York City, where I was living at the time, was a kind of a shortcut to doing private practice. But by the time I went to social work school, I knew plenty of MSWs who were doing clinical work and making a very good living as a private therapist. But I was never really interested in being a private therapist. I was interested in psychology in the workplace, industrial social work. And I had no idea that it was so incredibly politically liberal until I became a little more savvy to politics. And then I developed a major passion for politics around the time of Bill Clinton, when, he's the one that made me a political activist, when I thought that a credible accusation of rape to a president was the worst it could ever get. It isn't and wasn't the worst it could ever get, but I watched Juanita Broaddrick, and as a social worker, I said, my God, she's really telling the truth. I believed her, and she's never wavered, and she was telling the truth, as we now have pretty well figured out.
Wow. That's something.
Yeah.
Well, sis, let me. You talk about your politics and all. You do a blog. What is your blog, and how can people touch bases with it?
Oh, thank you. Well, I have a website that will tell you more about me than you ever want to know. It has my radio show, which I do 3 times a week, called Spouting Off. It is on WSMN Nashua, New Hampshire, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. Then I do a third show on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on BBS Radio. And it's all live call-in talk radio, but all the podcasts are available. And I just love, my first love, one of my earliest loves was live call-in talk radio. That is what the left doesn't want. They don't want us talking, debating issues, deciding that there is more than one point of view. And they're terrible at talk radio besides, because they can't tolerate dissent. They can't tolerate debate. So I love doing that show, Spouting Off, and I welcome people to call in, to write or whatever. Then I do a lot of articles. I just had one in the Western Journal called How the Left is, I can't remember, I paraphrase, I write a lot of stuff, encouraging Americans to commit suicide, and it's working. So you can see that I do use a lot of my skills to write some of my op-eds, because in fact, as an aside, remember that case of the teenage girl who encouraged her, I guess, boyfriend to commit suicide? Well, that story made an impression on me, and it seems as if the left has been enticing Americans to commit suicide for their country because many of them are too de-educated to realize that complying with lies, with collectivism, with bigger and biggest government and mandates all brings down the United States of America. And they're also being told that their country is a terrible, rotten, horrible country. Even though America's the last best hope for individual freedom. So I thought it was extremely important to point that out. And when you wear somebody down with self-hatred, then eventually they end up killing themselves. And why couldn't Conrad Roy was his name? He wasn't strong enough. He was depressed and debilitated in order to say to this girl, it's not on the tip of my tongue, her name, that she was sicker than he was, and to go pound sand. Yes. My point is that Americans need to tell this diabolical left to go pound sand, and it's time to stand up and say, no more forced vaccinations, no more forced muzzling of people. No, none of that. It's un-American, and you can see I'm very passionate about it, because liberty requires that you tolerate other people's ability to say, no, I disagree. And here we have Democrats run by communist socialists saying, well, we only believe in my body, my choice when it comes to abortion, but when it comes to your own right to decline putting a experimental substance into your body, and you may already have had COVID and it may not be indicated for you, you're forced to do it, or we'll take your job away and everything else. This is classic bullying and intimidation. And Americans got to get stronger and tell them to go pound sand.
Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and we have with us right now Miss Karen Kataline.
Yeah.
And based on her, I mean, just what you just heard, folks, we need to hear her voice, we need to hear her passion, her reason. Sis, we're here in Kentucky. How can we get your radio show here? Is there?
Easy. Well, it is syndicated. I would be delighted to have somebody pick up my show. But if you want to listen, all you got to do is go to my website, www.karenkataline.com. The last name spelled Kataline. And on the front page, there's a link to the show. There are phone numbers for both shows. And we're always looking for more syndication possibilities. We give the content away for free, and then we get sponsors, to carry the show. Mm-hmm. But spouting off, spouting off is a good thing because it means you're not censoring yourself. You're not censoring yourself. You're saying what's on your mind. People are so afraid of being rude, and yet they're being bullied by rudeness. And we've got to just say what's on our mind. I welcome all comers. I'm not afraid of people's disagreement with me, not one bit. But people who want to shut you down, shut you up, and tell you you're not allowed to think that, you're not allowed to question that, those are exactly the things you ought to question.
You are so correct. Sis, speaking as a Black conservative, I've seen other Black conservatives who are just so viciously attacked on a personal level. I just recently just heard how Larry Elder, his documentary, Uncle Tom, won't even be presented.
I love Larry Elder. He's one of my favorites. When I lived in LA, I called him up and I said, Larry, you're my aphrodisiac. And he wrote it. He put it on the opener of his show for a while. He's one of my all-time favorites. As a Jewish conservative, I have a special place in my heart for Black conservatives because you're the ones they want to destroy the most.
Yes.
And they're going to use Blacks as pawns in their plan, and they don't care about Blacks. They're the racists. Absolutely. The ones pointing the fingers, you're a racist, you're a racist. They're the racists because to them, everything is color.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I've got a little yard sign in front of my house with a picture of Martin Luther King, with his quote about content of your character instead of the color of your skin. Mm-hmm. And it says, character matters. They've bastardized what Martin Luther King stood for. So we have the right ideas. We are on the right side, but they're bullying people into shutting up. And so that's the reason shows like yours are so very important. And I applaud you for having this show. Good for you. Keep speaking out.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I also just wanted to, could you please give us your website again where people can go to get your articles, to call into your show, and maybe even, I like to suggest to my listeners, is it a sensible strategy to call local stations and say, hey, we want Spouting Off here?
Oh, God, I would love that. I would love that. See if you like it first, Call in, participate. I would have less guests if I had more callers, but it's a syndicated show. Mm-hmm. And believe me, I love callers even more than some guests. They're the best because So to answer your question, KarenKataline.com or just Google Spouting Off. It'll come up. I have a trademark on that name, Spouting Off. And just look it up. You can get it on your local podcast. You can get it on iHeart, all of those. And if you're listening live, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 or Fridays at 2, you can call in live and get on the show. Just look for the right phone number and on you go. We need to, it's like a muscle. You have to exercise your First Amendment rights, use it or lose it. That means go to your church, go to your synagogue, and do exactly what they hate, which is place God above men. They don't like that. They hate that, Yeah, that is so correct, Miss Karen. That is so correct. That is said dead on. And when you say also about how they sort of collapse when they may put out your position, and then you sort of say, "Well, I disagree with that." Yeah. And they have most of the times the only thing they have to come back with is,
Well, you're racist.
You're racist. Yeah. I've been called an anti-Semite. Candace Owens has been called a racist. Yeah. It isn't about racism. It's about dividing and conquering people by collectivist groups. That's what it's about.
Yes.
And they don't care any more about the people that they are codependent on than people they claim are racists. And I think people are finding that out. That's why they need to import a whole nother population of underclass from open borders in order to replace the Black community that's getting a clue that they've been exploited and abused by this cabal of power-hungry fearmongers. Do I seem a little strong about this? Yes, I am, because our country is on the brink. So we need people to stand up. There are more of us than there are of them, but a lot of us don't know that. Martin Luther King was a great champion of Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent resistance. And Gandhi wasn't a saint either, but I'm very fond of the whole idea. And if you haven't watched the 1982 movie Gandhi with Ben Kingsley, it's a brilliant treatise on nonviolent resistance. And that's what we need in this country right now. Say, this is enough. We've had enough. May Day is the perfect time, the communist holiday, May 1st, to rip off those masks and say, I will not be muzzled any longer.
Man, that's, sis, I'm going to interview there. That was a very powerful statement. Folks, please go to her website. Read her articles, tap into her blog page, and hopefully a few of us, well, I know I'm going to do it. I'm going to call 9:70 a.m. right here in Louisville, Kentucky, and that's
baby.
We need to get her on, right? We need for it to happen.
Thank you. I did a show in Louisville, Kentucky many years ago at the Windmill Dinner Theater.
Okay.
So yeah, I did several shows there when I was doing showbiz. So I love Louisville, Kentucky. Neat. Oh, I would love that.
Well, I'm going to see to it that Louisville starts showing you some love.
Well, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And I'd be happy to do your show anytime you ask.
Oh, thank you.
I'm available.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Well, we're going to conclude here. This is Book Talk with Corbin. I just had a great time with our sister, Karen Kataline. Thank you, ma'am, and I will be in touch.
Thank you, Corbin. You take care. Bye.